demolish the Christians, bro. Demolish the Christians. I just demolished the Christians, bro. Meet me in World of Warcraft later for an after party.
So I'm not so much into demolishing and such, but I am an atheist, and I came across your video recently from a friend, and I found some of your argumentation interesting.
Okay.
I had a question regarding epistemology of perception. Are you at all familiar with like the neo-realist tradition, or the more direct realist tradition along the lines of like William James and such, and how they would consider things like logic and stuff within the structure of reality and more functional in a process and not an immaterial entity? And do you have a response to that?
Yes, I am. So I think the problem with this position is that it doesn't account for the things that we need and expect and actually see logic, words, meaning, concepts, math doing, right? So, for example, I don't see how something that's an immaterial invariant thing could be a process. And so if it's not itself a process, or if it's not a social construct, or if it's not itself identical to matter, then what is it? And once we try to identify or reduce any of these things to matter, or when we don't want to give an account for immaterial invariant objects, or we want to say that the mind is identical to matter, we're actually placing ourselves in impossible positions. And so you're welcome to make argumentation along those lines if you want to.
Okay, so what if we conceived of first of all, I don't believe in immaterial things, so I'd try and conceive of everything materially because that's more parsimonious. But say if we had a sort of definition of mind along the lines of a set of interrelationships between material things, and then we consider things like logic, because obviously I wouldn't say logic's immaterial, I would say it's a material thing, but it's not an entity, right? Because an entity, there's no like entity, like you couldn't cut open a brain or any sort of reasoning being and find an entity of logic, right? I think we both agree on that. But, if you considered things like logic and like experience and all these things that you would label as immaterial, instead of as immaterial entities that exist in some sort of universal category, instead they were just relationships between material entities, or like complex sets of interrelationships between material things. And then you could kind of conceive of it that way. What would you respond to that?
Yeah. So my question would be, and as I was listening to you talk, I wrote down 3 things that I would like you to clarify if you would. So when you talk about a set of things, and when you talk about relationships, and when you talk about complex sets, when you talk about the things, I assume you mean when you pick out objects in the world. What is the set that classes those set of things?
Okay, well, I guess it would depend on what we're talking about. So let's.
Well, I'm asking you because this is what you said.
Experience, as an example.
Well, I mean, so you said thing. Hold on.
Oh, sorry,
so, are you talking about objects in the world? That's what I assume you mean by things. You said relationships between those things in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what is this thing that you're calling a set of those things?
What is this thing that I'm calling a set of things?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, it's a set of relationships, as in like. Okay, because I guess what you're trying to say is you're trying to say.
Okay, so the set is the hold on. So
thing,
the set is
is
the relationship.
Sorry?
Is that what you're saying? The set is identical to the relationship?
Well, no, because like you could have a bunch of individual relationships, and then a set of them is just a collection of relationships.
Okay, so when we talk about a series of objects, right, that we're calling a coconut or whatever, you're saying that is a set of 7 coconuts. Right, there's 7 of these things, and that set we're calling coconuts, right?
Kind of. I guess, like, for example, if you're looking at numbers and you wanted to find an empirical example of numbers, you could find 7 coconuts and then see the relationship between them of 7 different entities.
Okay, so hold on. So you said the set, the set is identical to the relationship now, in this case, in this example.
I'm not sure I fully understand what you mean, but what I'm hearing,
I thought that's what you said. The set here, in the case of the coconuts, is the relationship between the coconuts, and there's 7 of them.
Right, that would be one set of relationships, sure, yep.
Okay, so 7 is identical to the material components that make up the 7 coconuts?
Identical is not exactly the word I'd use. I would say that's sort of like an instantiation of that relationship.
So there's a distinction between the set and the individuals, such that the set is instantiated.
Well, in the sense, like, yes, because there's like an individual example of it, and then you could find that example elsewhere. I don't think there's like
what is instantiated? Because you said you're a materialist.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not actually anything instantiated. I mean, in your mind, you might perceive an instantiation, but in the world, there's nothing instantiated.
Right. Okay. Sorry. I'm probably not going to be using, like, I'm only in like my bachelor's degree level of education, so my use of terminology might not be perfect. So I apologize for that. But in terms of, like, I would consider these sort of relationships to be found within the structure of reality, within the structure of material reality, without a necessity for immaterial reality, in the sense that, you know, you can find empirical examples of these different, like,
so
logical categories.
What is instantiated?
What is instantiate?
Mm-hmm. No, what is instantiated in the 7 coconuts?
The relationship of 7.
Okay, so the set is the relationship.
Sure.
So what's instantiated is identical to the objects there.
It's found within that structure, yeah.
Okay. Where in those molecules do you find 7?
Within, so it's not an, see, the thing is, it's not an entity, right? You're not finding like an entity example.
Okay,
You're
so
finding
instantiated,
sets
you said instantiated, that's a metaphysical term. You said it's in the objects themselves. What is
in the relationship between the objects?
Okay, but
not in, like, it's not an entity, it's a relationship.
Okay, so you're saying that the set is identical to the relationship between the objects.
Not quite.
Okay, but that's what you said, and then you said it was instantiated. So I'm asking you, what's instantiated when what's in front of us is molecules?
Right. So the difference is, like, and maybe I'm not wording it.
So you think look? Let me ask it this way: the number 7 is literally identical to 7 coconuts.
No, not quite. But it's not identical to the coconuts. It's the relationship between the coconuts. It's not the entity of the coconuts.
I just asked you if the set was identical to the relationship, and you said yes and no. So what distinguishes those 7 coconuts to the right and the 7 bananas to the left, if 7 is merely a set of relations?
Because of their identity as separate, like, coconuts.
That's begging the question, because I'm asking you you said it's because it's instantiated. Yeah, but it's also instantiated in the 7 bananas on the left. But the number 7, you said the number 7 is identical to the relationship of 7 coconuts. So if it's identical, then it's
the relationship
different.
that could be found within sets of many different 7.
Oh, okay. So it's now you have an instantiation that is not identical to the relationship.
Right.
Okay, so now you refuted yourself. Exactly. Because you said...
Can you explain how I refuted myself? Sorry.
Is the 7 coconuts on the left identical to the 7 bananas on the right?
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Is the 7 coconuts on the left identical to the 7 bananas on the right?
No.
Okay, so how are they both, quote, 7?
Well, they're 2 different examples of a relationship of 7 different items.
Where's the 7?
They're 2 different types of
Where's
items.
the 7? So they're instantiations of a type or a set, but you said the set was identical to the relationships. But I've given you 2 different sets of 7.
Right, so it would be 2 different examples of 7.
Okay. Examples are instantiations of something higher. Where's the 7? What is the thing that is the same thing between the bananas on the left and the coconuts on the right? You said the relationship. No, again, the relationship is just the 7 things, according to you. So what is shared between those 7 things and the other 7 things?
The amount?
Okay, so right, that's circular. That's begging the question because that's the set. That's the number 7.
That experience of
So again, so right, so that's self-refuting, right? Because you just said that the number 7 is a set that's actually in the world. Now you're saying it's just experience that would be in your mind.
Well, I'd consider mind also to just be a relationship between, say, an organism and
okay,
its
but that's not
environment.
going to answer the problem of the 7 coconuts. This just makes it worse for you because now you're appealing to something that is neither of those things, and we don't even know if you have a way to access the external world, right? I mean, are you aware of that problem in philosophy? That like, is there?
Well, yeah, I'm okay. So that problem itself would be based off because I understand you refer a lot to Hume as sort of like the pinnacle example of like the empiricist thought, and obviously he was one of the major proponent of skepticism, right?
Yeah,
Though,
and
I guess
so
my
has that
problem
whole
with Hume,
that whole tradition has continued that, right?
Yeah. Well, there is a line of empirical thought that is based off that because that's sort of takes the framework of like the Cartesian and Kantian sort of indirect representationism of reality, right? So that's all like that's built on the fact that, you know, as Galileo kind of laid out, you have primary and secondary properties, and then Descartes would have said that these secondary properties are radically distinct from the primary, and that exists in the mind and so
Locke
on.
says that
so
too,
that Hume based his skepticism on the Cartesian idea that we experience reality indirectly, whereas I wouldn't hold that position. I would hold a position that we do experience reality.
Direct realism,
like a naive realist position.
It doesn't get you out of the dilemmas because that you hold that doesn't provide a justification. I mean, I'm glad that you hold that. I believe in a form of realism as well. But that's not the same thing as a justification for the belief in external world. That's a position. What's the justification for that position? And again, that's a different. That's a
parsimonious, simple explanation. Then
okay, but that's a presupposition. So why is just because something is appears to be simple, is it therefore more rational or the one that we ought to choose?
Because if we chose something that's a more complicated,
that's begging the question. 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 Begging the question. How do we know that we ought to choose what's more simple? Because we shouldn't choose what's complex. Begging the question.
How should we... Well, sorry, can you repeat the question?
You have a presupposition that the simple explanation is the one that we ought to choose. What is the justification for that belief and for the ought? And you said, because we shouldn't choose complex things.
So the justification for why... Well, I guess that's kind of just repeating myself.
Anyway, look, dude. Where is the number 7 in this transaction? Would you agree that you and I are talking about the number 7 right now?
Yes.
Okay. Is the number 7 in my head identical to the number 7 in your head?
Let me think about.
Are the molecules in my head the same as the molecules in your head?
No, they would be two different.
And you believe the number 7 is identical to molecules? You said it was instantiated. You said it was instantiated. You said it was. You said it was instantiated in code.
Between the molecules, not the molecules.
And you said the set was identical to the relationship and is identical to the 7 coconuts.
Well, that's the thing. I don't consider it identical. I consider it that you have the entities, like, and you can have a certain amount of entities.
Okay, what's an entity? Okay, so this is metaphysical language. Where do you get a justification for all this metaphysical baggage that you're using here? Entities?
Okay, so from my understanding, and to be fair, I still have plenty to learn. I'm still learning a lot about this kind of stuff. I would consider that the metaphysical, like I agree that metaphysics is valuable and useful. My question is to be, why does, like, I don't understand the need for immaterial things.
Okay. Is the number 7 is the number 7
the structure of reality?
Is the number 7 in my head identical to the number 7 in your head?
No, because we have two different experiences of that relationship.
Okay. So what is the common thing between the two experiences? Yeah, exactly.
The sort of like
this is
rule
what
that
you
see within
you can't
every time we experience.
That's not an answer. That's not an answer. What is the common thing between what's in my head and your head? Since you just said they're different, but you said 2 minutes ago that we're both talking about the same number 7. This is Philosophy 101, Plato. Did you take a Plato class?
I've read some of Plato, not enough to.
So Plato 101 would be one in many. Do you know about the problem of the one in many? All right. So you got cheated in your education. You got sold a bill of goods and you didn't learn the basics. I'm not trying to be mean to you, but
I'm not
when we read Plato, see,
this
is what is produced in the universities is people that don't know fundamental questions in epistemology and metaphysics, like the one in the many. So all I'm doing is rehashing a Platonic dialogue with you.
Mm-hmm. And I'd be happy to look into that more, because right now, as I said, I didn't want to have like a debate or anything. I'm just trying to get some of the questions I need to research myself, So.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to debate to come on here. So that's true.
Okay, cool.
And I respect that.
Yeah, I mean, I joined this Discord to, challenge my own perspectives and see, some of the stronger arguments for perspectives that I don't hold, so that I can then go, research them and learn more and produce a better argument. Right.
So I would say that reducing conceptual things, invariant things, abstract things to physical things is self-refuting by virtue of what we just talked about in the last 20 minutes. That would be my argument against what you're talking about.